Good morning, and welcome to the school board workshop for May 26, 2023. Before we get going, I want to say a big congratulations to Parish Community High School on their state championship softball yesterday, I believe, yesterday afternoon. They won 5-0, and congratulations to Coach Aaron Spivey and the team out there. It's a major accomplishment. I think that's 3 years in a row. We've had a girls softball be state champs with Lakewood Ranch back to back. So, congratulations to y'all out there. Exciting stuff. Way to end the school year. Obviously, being last day of school. Hope all the teachers finish the year okay and everybody gets home good and safe. Exciting times. I can't believe it's already the end of the year. It feels like we were just waving to the buses on the first day of school yesterday. We did it again this morning. So it has flown by. So I want to call to order. We're going to move to item number 2, public comments. I do not believe we have any public comments for this morning's workshop. So let's jump into our first item today, which is the environmental inspection results for the Manatee Technical College Aviation Mechanics Airframe and Power Plant Maintenance Training and Education Program lease site. It's a lot there. So I think Mr. Piccolo was going to be the first, or who was going to be the first to present?
Mr. Penley.
Mr. Penley, come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, and superintendent. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the Manatee Technical College Aviation Mechanics lease site. I also have with me our environmental consultant, Ken Caldwell with GHD. We have Mr. Rick Piccolo, of the CEO and president of the Sarasota-Brendan Airport, or International Airport, and his team of environmental consultants, EAC. Mr. Piccolo is going to be presenting after I do, so he's going to update you where I'm talking about the environmental testing that's occurred. He's going to update you on some training opportunities in the aviation mechanics field. In May of 2022, the school board entered into a lease agreement with the airport authority, and it was for a piece of property at 7990 15th Street East, which is directly adjacent to the airport on the east side of the airport. The lease had a provision that said it's subject to a Phase 2 environmental audit being acceptable to the school board. So there were 2 Phase 1 environmental audits done on this site with varying results, but there are some commonalities between the 2. Now, a Phase 1 environmental audit is non-invasive, meaning there's no actual testing. It's a review of historic records of the property and the surrounding properties and local and state and regional databases to determine if there's been any contamination on the property or nearby. So we took those studies and took the commonalities out of those and retained GHD, specifically Ken Caldwell, to do our Phase 2 testing. Now, Phase 2 testing is invasive, meaning there's monitoring wells put in to test the groundwater, and there's soil samples done. So in this instance, we're being very cautious because of the past use of the site. Both of the Phase 1 environmental audits said that the past use was a marine manufacturing and servicing center that included a photo lab and a paint lab. So we also know that there was contamination on a nearby property called American Beryllium, which is now Lockheed Martin. And for those of you that have been here a long time, you might remember the Talavasta plume. Well, that's where that originated. It's approximately 1/3 mile north of this site. So we wanted to ensure that that wasn't affecting this property. Also, the property to the east historically was used for agricultural uses, and the property immediately adjacent, where the airport is, was a former military training airfield. So GHD performed an analysis on a typical suite of industrial and commercial constituents, excuse me, and also agrochemicals. Now, some of what they would be looking for are things like cadmium, lead, copper, arsenic, PCBs, volatile organic compounds, and the agrochemicals would be herbicides and pesticides. The good news is that there were no instances of those type compounds being above what are called the soil cleanup target levels or the groundwater cleanup target levels. So for those chemicals, the site was below those thresholds that are established by either EPA or DEP. We also had them test for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are called PFAS. And we're going to talk a lot about that here in just a minute, but just know that PFAS include a chemical underneath that umbrella that's called PFOS, which is I hate to have to say all this, perfluorooctane sulfonic acid. So on this chart right here on the right-hand side, you can see that PFAS is basically the umbrella under which you find these other 4 types of what they call forever chemicals. So I just mentioned PFOS is one of those. And there's also thousands of these other substances that are under that umbrella. Now, it's important for you to know that PFOS are not currently regulated. So that's an important distinction here. But they are going to be regulated. There's little doubt about that. EPA has already set what's called a provisional cleanup target level. They've suggested one, and that is a threshold which they say is safe versus unsafe. But they have not adopted any formal legislation at this time. Okay, now the Florida legislature last year passed legislation that says that if EPA doesn't regulate PFAS by 2025, DEP has to do so, the Florida DEP. So it's coming. It's something we call it an emerging constituent because it's not regulated right now, but it will be. So what are these PFOS and PFAS? And well, you can see on this list to the left that they were used in a lot of common products like stain-resistant fabrics and upholstered furniture, even your food packaging. I recently found out from the airport's environmental consultant, EAC, that it's used in dental floss. So it's everywhere. And one of the things that we were concerned about, and the reason we were looking at this, is because airports throughout the years have used firefighting foam that included these chemicals. So now PFAS were actually phased out in production here in 2002, but they're still produced in other countries and is still available here, obviously. So if you noticed on that last slide, they're called forever chemicals. I think I mentioned that before, because they just don't break down in the environment. So we were being very cautious looking at these. Unfortunately, I've got to tell you that probably each one of you has some PFAS in your body right now. You've come in contact with it, you've ingested it. And there's a lot of health risks that are being linked to it now. These are some very recent studies that are showing liver cancer, tumors, kidney cancer, DNA changes. So they're still studying this, and it's an area to keep an eye on for the next few years because I think there's going to be a lot happen here. One of the major producers was 3M. So if you kind of look at the list of things over here that it's used in, you might recognize that 3M has a lot of those type products out there. So what did we find? We had a series of 8. We had 8 monitoring wells. 6 of those were temporary monitoring wells, and on all the wells, everything came back good. On 6 of them, everything came back good. It was below that provisional cleanup target level. The temporary well 1, when we tested it in July of 22, it was slightly above that provisional cleanup target level. We retested it in September and again in February, and you can see from these results that it was below the provisional cleanup target level threshold. Then on temporary well 3 in September, it again slightly above the PCTL, and by February it had dropped to below the provisional cleanup target level. Now, why is that? Did we go clean it up, or did the airport go clean it? No. It's in the groundwater, so the groundwater moves. And on this particular site, I think the groundwater moves kind of opposite of what you would think in this area. It moves in an easterly direction. So it's flowing through there, which is somewhat problematic because we don't know where the source is. So you can't just go attack the source of it. If we were to go do these tests 100 more times, would we have more hits that were above that provisional cleanup target level? Very likely. But what I can tell you right now is that we had hits above that PCTL. We retested and they were below. The last thing that I want to present to you is there's a section of your lease. It's 23.1, and it says the Phase 2 environmental audit will establish a baseline indicating the current condition of the premises, which is the baseline environmental report. So that is your Phase 2 that we've done. The leasee, meaning the school board, is not responsible for hazardous material remediation already existing on the site and or future remediation that pre-existed the occupancy by the leasee. So in summary, what I can tell you is that this was clean for all your typical commercial and industrial and agrochemical substances. That was below the thresholds that have been established by EPA or DEP. We had 2 tests that identified PFAS above the provisional cleanup target level. That provisional cleanup target level may change. It's 0.07 micrograms per liter right now, which is very, very minute. I mean, it's like a teardrop in a swimming pool, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you know. So very minute amounts that we're dealing with here. There's already talk about changing that target level. I think there's going to be a lot of input on that. You've got the companies that have produced it in the past that will want some say in it. You've got your cities and counties and townships that run municipal water supply systems that will want to weigh in because it is in the water systems in a lot of these places. They're already lining up for lawsuits here to sue the manufacturers of it, because it can be very, very expensive for these agencies if there's a level adopted that is very stringent. It could cost, you know, a city just many, many millions of dollars to meet those regulations. So I think they'll have input. Then you've got politicians involved, and you've got the lobbyists involved. So who knows where all that will end up. But just know that for right now, what they're talking about is 0.07. And keep in mind that they're currently not regulated, but that they will be. And you know, if the site were completely clean, I wouldn't be standing here today. But we found this, and we felt it incumbent upon us to let you know. since you've entered into the lease. With that, I can answer questions or have Mr. Caldwell.
So can I just would like to add one thing to what he said for the scope. So none of the soil was found with any contaminants. It was in the groundwater, which is 7 feet below the soil surface. And we will not be using groundwater. We will not be penetrating groundwater for irrigation, for drinking, for anything. So the intent for the structure of the site will not have any access to the groundwater. These chemicals that were found and the not found are in the groundwater 7 foot below the soil, and groundwater moves. So it's flowing, so anywhere that water's flowing is where you're going to find, so it could come and go. And so I just wanted to make sure, because he's talking about wells, I just wanted to put it in context so you understood where that chemical was found. So that's my
And let me
that's my
just
part.
add on to that. Thank you for bringing that up, because it slipped my mind. So those wells that we're talking about, those are temporary monitoring wells. They've been removed already. The only purpose of those is for testing here. You might think retention would be an issue because the groundwater gets into the retention, but the retention is handled by a master stormwater retention system, so we wouldn't have on-site retention here. And we could develop the site with xeriscape type landscaping where you don't even need to irrigate it. So I absolutely agree with what Ms. Saunders has told you.
Before we get to the next part, there may be questions about this particular part. The only question, I had a question on, I know you've already said they're not regulated currently. The PFOS, I'm gonna stick with acronyms. My wife's a science teacher, she'd probably kill me. So, when the tests that we're doing though, would those be the tests that, let's say we were doing this fast forward 5 years from now, and the DEP and the EPA, they were making us test, would these be the tests that we'd have to be doing to satisfy that anyways, right?
Yeah,
Or would we be doing some other type of test to satisfy them?
If you have the mic.
If you could come to Mike, yeah, sorry.
This is Ken Caldwell. He's with GHD, our environmental consultant.
So currently, EPA has, I think the short answer is yes. As of today, these are the industry standard tests.
Okay.
The EPA only now has an approved method for drinking water, which is not groundwater, so it's a modified method now. They're working on methods. Again, as Mike said, this is an emerging issue. So not only is the regulation in flux, the methodology to look for it, to test for it, is in flux. Okay. So as of today, we use the industry standard method that's out there and accepted. And for instance, it's a method that the DEP is using in their lab. We didn't use the DEP lab, but it's an analytical method that it's equivalent to what they're using.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, that answers mine. Ms. Messenger, do you have any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Not at this time.
Okay. Ms. Spray?
I do on the test wells, the first PCTL. The .07 is the normal, the accepted level, and then you have the .0869 in test well 1 in red, and in test well 3 you have .097. So you're saying .07 is kind of the standard, that it's safe level?
That is the .07 micrograms per liter is
Okay.
the provisional cleanup target level, meaning that's what EPA has suggested, that they're looking at making that the safe level. Again, that's going to change most likely. Don't know if it's going up or going down, but as it works through this process, that number will likely change. So yes, they were above that provisional safe level.
For February of 23?
Yes, but then when we retested, they were below that.
Okay. And then you said that this number for the acceptable levels, my terminology, in 2027, they're going to change change that you're saying? You said something about it's probably gonna change in 2027.
In 2025, if EPA has not adopted a standard, the Florida legislature has said that the Florida DEP shall adopt a standard.
Okay. And then you said something about legal people getting involved. Is that
Yeah,
2020?
there, my understanding is there are cities even within this state that are looking at potentially suing the manufacturers of this because
Like
it's in the
big
water
class
system.
action suit type thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then on your deck, we didn't get to the pictures. Are we gonna get to that
Yes, Mr.
part?
Piccolo
Okay.
is going to
Okay,
present
all
that
right,
to you if
fine.
you're
That's
ready.
all I had on that, thanks.
Yeah. I'm having to zoom in, looking at
It's tiny.
the table.
That's
thank
just
you.
kind of a, don't worry about all that. What's on that table is on that other slide that shows the
Yeah, just for the one,
wells.
you know, but
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a worrywart, and if we, on any of these others, if we were close to the danger level, I'd like to know that, you know, so I would ask that, okay, first I wanted to ask, are we doing both? Did we test all wells for all of these components twice?
Yes. Some we only tested once. If the
They were clean
initial,
the first time you didn't test them?
well, if the initial test showed that it was below that provisional cleanup target level, we did not retest. We only retested when it showed it was above the provisional cleanup target level, except that temporary well 3, I believe we added that on the second set of tests. We were trying to find out where the parameters of, you know, this PFAS was, and we got a hit there. So, no, we did not.
But remember, the other environmentalists tested also.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
would it be possible that with the first test, it would come in clean, but had there been a second test, it might be different
Well,
on some of these other
I'll
components?
give you my answer. Ken can give you his. Again, I think if you went out here and tested 100 times, you might get test results that show that that the PFAS are above the provisional cleanup target level. And that's because the groundwater moves and we don't know the source.
Well,
It-
just take a different, take arsenic, you know, could it have been tested for arsenic the first time and went, yep, no, we're fine? And then had it been tested for arsenic the second time, where we could have had a poor result?
You want to address that?
So, I mean, the convention is kind of the phase one, which was done to identify, is there a possible, you know, concern? It's kind of a, you know, concern, yes, no. And if the concern is yes, then it's like, okay, well, what is the question? What is the concern? And then what would we test for? And so we did those series of tests. But the tests, frankly, were from a conservative standpoint, because although there was some concerns, potential concerns, there wasn't any identifiable record that suggested that there was any, you know, impact on the site. So we kind of do what we call a screening approach. We say, hey, here's the potential things that we might find. Let's go look. And what normally happens is if we're kind of just, you know, using a shotgun and we shoot the shotgun and nothing comes back at us, we're like, well, okay, they must have just all gone off. You know, there wasn't anything. So what we then do is say, oh, we did find something. Okay, now let's drill down on that. Whereas when we did the broad brush, it wasn't there. We typically don't look for it anymore. Does that kind of answer the question? I'm going to credit your thinking. I mean, it's good thinking. But if we have no reason to think something's there, and we prove to ourselves, kind of scientific method, if we prove to ourselves it's not there, then we kind of we move on.
Okay.
Is that, you
Well, it
seem like you're
answers my
uncomfortable.
question. It doesn't
Okay.
give me confidence, but it
Well,
answers.
how can I give you better confidence? I'd be happy to try.
The only thing that would give me confidence is to go out and test for all of these again, you know, but,
Oh, okay, well,
that's.
somebody else's decision.
Well, things,
Mhm.
my point is that test results change.
Sure.
And so you may have had a good day for arsenic, but if it went out and tested it today,
When I was 20, my blood cholesterol was really good.
you know,
Not so good right now.
yeah, but you know, and one of the side effects of this one is cholesterol, so I'm gonna blame it on that. But yeah, no, okay. Were there any of, when you did the scatter shot, you know, and just did the screening, were there any that were close to, because this table does not tell us what the acceptable level is, except for the PFAS.
Except for the one. That table was extracted out for just that, yes. And the reason why there's a lot of numbers on the table is because we analyze for a lot of things. Currently, it's only the provisional number on those two compounds that are written there. There are other compounds that were detected. There are studies going on to determine whether there should be numbers, set for those. It's just not there yet. So basically what's happens is the EPA is now in public comment period. They've proposed numbers, and now everybody's commenting on the numbers before they can adopt it. The same thing will frankly have to happen with the DEP. They will have to go through a rule-making process, and so it'll take some time. But I'm not answering your question. The answer is that yes, there were some things detected on the site. Most were not, but these were the only two that were above or that were within a couple, fractions of a percent.
I would like to see a table updated with the, to show what the accepted level is, so that,
For everything we tested for. Yeah, yeah.
you know, I mean, if it was close, I would want it tested again. Actually, I want them all tested again, but if it was close, I definitely test it again. So,
Okay.
thank you. The other is, now there's state statutes that say, that where school sites have to be safe, okay? Has this report gone to the Florida Department of Education?
No, it has not.
So they have not weighed in on it?
No.
So this could all be an exercise in discussion that they may come, that DOE may say, nope, you got a problem here.
Phase 2 environmental, I don't know of any Phase 2 environmental report that's ever been submitted to DOE. It's something that's handled by the local school board. It's up to the school board to follow the rules that have been promulgated by DOE.
So they don't approve or disapprove?
No.
They just take the stuff and go build highways, right?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum?
So, Mr. Penley, good morning.
Morning.
So are we in compliance with the rules and the laws and all the things that are out there?
That's, I would go back to what I said earlier, that for the commercial, industrial, and agrochemical compounds, yes, we're in compliance. For the PFAS, they're not currently regulated. So are we in compliance? Yeah. But what you have to be looking for is, will we be in compliance in the future? And that's something we can't answer because we don't know what that standard is going to be set at.
Those are groundwater issues though, right? Did I understand
Yes, sir.
that correctly?
Yes, sir. That's only groundwater.
Okay.
which, as Ms. Saunders said, we won't be into the groundwater.
And so this site is going to be used for A&P training, I guess, airline and power plant mechanic training, is that correct?
That's correct.
So one thing I think we need to keep in mind here, having been in aviation myself, both as a military pilot and as a civilian pilot, is that these students will be working with corrosive chemicals, all of these things. You know, at some point, we call it operational risk management. I understand Mrs. Foreman's concern that we don't want to poison students at this site, but they're going to be working with these toxic chemicals every day on their hands, breathing them. So at some point, we just have to say, well, you know, what is the acceptable risk here? There's a couple compounds in the groundwater that maybe are a little higher than what scientists say they should be. Today they were, yesterday they weren't. We could test and test and test and find one day that things are above and the next day they are below. But again, realizing that they're going to be working with toxic chemicals anyway on a daily basis. At some point, for me at least, we just say this is an acceptable risk, and we'll move. The benefits of having this program outweigh the risk. I mean, even when, you know, I read an article the other day that says if you're standing putting gasoline in your car and you smell the gasoline fumes, those are actually carcinogenic substances that are going in your body. So, you know, at some point we just have to say this is an acceptable risk. For me personally, I'm okay with where we are. Again, since I've been around this stuff all of my life, we just have to move forward at some point. So thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think that's it for the questions. from environmental.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Piccolo to come up.
Absolutely.
And can advance it with the.
Get that, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the opportunity to speak with you. Before I get into the presentation on what we're trying to accomplish here, I think it's important to emphasize a few things with the environmental. Now, we have our whole environmental team here, our engineering team, our properties team, and even the EDC is here to show how important it is that we can move forward with this. But I think it's very important to say this is a clean site. The soil tests show that it was a clean site. The only thing that they're of concern, again, is in the groundwater underneath it. There might be groundwater underneath you right now that's 7 feet underneath here that has something in it as well. But you're not exposed to it because you haven't dug into the ground. We're not digging into the ground. We won't expose that. So from the standpoint of it being a clean site, it's a clean site. And we're just as concerned about making sure it's clean as anyone else. But PFAS is an issue in the industry and one that's being discussed with EPA, but it really is related to firefighting foam. I think most of the issues with lawyers are about drinking water and what some communities are doing. There are some airports that are located very close. I think there was one out in Michigan that's very close to where the water intake is for the entire city, and that's where they had a bigger concern. So I just want to make sure you understand this is a clean site, and we're not going to go into the ground and go down that 7 feet and expose that groundwater, which is flowing everywhere. So it could be, as I said, it could be under you right now. And I also would encourage you to please don't quit flossing, even though it's in there. Our environmental consultant once said that if a truckload of floss crashed on I-75 and tipped over, it could become, under the new PFAS rules, a hazardous materials exercise. And I do want to emphasize that that 0.07 is parts per trillion. As Mike said, we're talking about a drop of water in an Olympic pool is basically what that is. So 7 parts per trillion is a very, very small amount. So I don't want to poo-poo this issue, but I also don't want it overemphasized. We're giving you a clean site, and one that we're just as concerned about safety of students as you are. And these are young adult students. Now, this has been a 3-year effort, not just a 1-year effort that you see in this lease. Doug and I met a few years ago, first starting to get this program going, and we're very excited about it. So as you can see, as far as the background on this school, Boeing has estimated that the outlook is for 626,000 technicians will be needed worldwide between now and 2040. So there's a lot of job opportunity out there. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2021, the average starting wage of this kid that comes out of this school will be over $65,000. So you've got an opportunity worldwide with a good starting salary. Kids come out of high school in 18 months to 24 months, they can get their mechanic's license and go to work. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics job growth projection just for the next 7 years is 11% annually. As I said, it typically takes 18 to 24 months to go through the school. Costs can range from $8,000 to $40,000. And I actually had a discussion with Paul before we started here. His son went to school for A&P mechanics up in Polk County, because we don't have anything here, and it was $50,000. So if you don't want kids to have to pay the kind of money that we're talking about and go through the debts that they have, there's a good example just right here at home. There's currently no schools in Manatee or Sarasota County. The closest one I know is the National Aviation Academy up in Pinellas County, which is a private school and runs, I'm sorry, Paul's looked at that. That was $50,000. His son went to Polk County because that was a county school that made it less expensive. I think it was about $13,000, if I recall correctly, Paul. So you can see the difference we can make for our students, for our children and our grandchildren, where they can come here locally, they can stay at home so they're not incurring debt with dorms, and they can go through school a lot cheaper and then go into a worldwide opportunity that's going to do nothing but grow. And we have a big interest in this, not just from the standpoint of that we want to see the school there and have a public interest. We've put $1.5 million in the civil work and design plans for this school. The design is done, it's on the shelf, and we paid for it. We also build hangars adjacent to it that will have aircraft activities in there. So there's a job. In many cases, I'll be waiting for a student. And I think one of the reasons I can say that Sharon is here from the EDC is because we're working very closely with the EDC and trying to bring in major repair operators here to the airport. And one of the key components would be you'll have a job pipeline and a pipeline of talent that can then go to work right away for those types of activities. It's very similar to Silicon Valley because the universities there crank out a bunch of IT kids that can go to work right there. Well, we want to be able to crank out a bunch of kids and go to work right here in Mechanic. We've given favorable lease terms, including the first 3 years of rent abatement, so that you don't even have to take rent while you start to establish the program. And I'm on the USF Board of Trustees, and I'm working with them to try and establish an aeronautical engineering program at the airport as well. So we're talking about students come out of high school and maybe have both either a technical opportunity or a university opportunity right here on the airport. So we're trying very hard to help the educational program here, and I think this is a unique opportunity for the children and grandchildren in this community to stay local and work local, or have a worldwide opportunity if they want it at a good job. We're not talking about somebody who becomes a waiter. We're talking about people that become technically enabled, and in many cases, and I'm sure, Commissioner, you would voice that after a few years of working, if they're talented, they're going to be making six figures. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to come and speak in front of you. And we're excited about the opportunity to bring children in and teach them stuff that's in aviation and get them in a great career path. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions you all may have.
We'll start with Ms. Tatum. Any questions for Mr. Piccolo?
What's the timeline to bring this forward and actually have a student there doing?
Well, that would be up to the school board building the hangar, but we've already built the parking lots done. The only thing there is the site, and I would say that I don't think there's any difference in the soil from when it was tested a year ago, because nothing's been done there. All the parking's done, the driveways are done, as you saw from that. Let me go back a second. As you see from that picture, if you look at the hangars where the two aircraft are, that hangar's been built. The other hangar was where the school would be, but all that pavement and everything that's around that school on this picture is done. We paid for that, so it's done.
So is this part of, maybe, Ms. Honor, this is part of the capital? Is this, I assume, part of?
Yes, sir. This is one of our appropriations from the state. So we just felt an abundance of overcaution because of the groundwater. We needed to disclose that. This site, as stated, is clean. My goal, honestly, would be to have a groundbreaking sometime in June. And then we will move forward. We do have the appropriation, so we'll have to go back with permitting and making sure that we're ready to go, because we haven't really looked at it for a little bit. Like you said, it's been on the shelf for a second or two, but we do have the appropriations already in our budget awaiting beginning this project.
I know I may be speaking out of turn, but it's probably about 2 years would be a good estimate of when they would actually start the classes by the time they get the contract, build the school, and put the equipment in. So about 2 years from now, I think is probably a reasonable timeline.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of it. And again, I think it sounds like the professionals have done their due diligence as far as making sure that the site is safe, and there is just some amount of risk we have to accept in life that, like I said, if you're standing and breathing gas fumes or inhaling carcinogenic substances all the time. So yeah, these will be really good jobs as we talk about artificial intelligence and stuff like that coming on board. I don't see how those kind of computers will be able to repair airplanes and climb inside of jet engines. They may be good at diagnosing problems and stuff like that, but you'll still need, 10 fingers or so and 2 feet and some legs and arms to get up in there and repair jet engines. It's a great career. Like you said, aviation is just going to get bigger as population grows and more countries and populations are plugged into the world economic system. So yeah, this is a great opportunity for us here in Manatee County to provide some great careers for students without having to go to the four corners of the earth to get that training. So thank you all, Mr. Wagner, and whoever else has worked on this, all of you right here. It's a great program. Yep, good, thank you. That's all I have, thank you.
Thanks. I'll just say too, to remind, this program I think is, I don't think we truly understand, and I'm not an aviation expert by any means, but I feel like the more I researched this over the past year or so, I didn't know the companies that were around the airport did what they did and are world leaders in, Safran and all those companies. And it's like, I think this could open doors much bigger than just what we have. Let me look what you're trying to do with USF, right? I would like to say, I would love to get this going ASAP. And I think we've done our due diligence. And at the same time, we 2 years ago, or two legislation cycles ago, we got the money. And I'm not one that's going to tell the governor and legislation, hey, thanks for the money, but we're not spending it. Because it's hard pressed to get money from appropriations. So I think that it's something that would be a great impact on our kids here. Not only our kids, but I think we will attract families, et cetera, that want to move here because of it. So I'm all in and ready to rock and roll. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to piggyback a little bit on what you just said, that's one of the reasons that Sharon and Max are here. Joe from our properties department, in about a month, they go off to Paris Air Show. We've been meeting with manufacturers and mechanical companies for about 3 years, and I think we're getting closer and closer to bringing some of that here and bringing that, just what you said, an aviation cluster of activity, like the Safrans and that type of thing, so that there'll be job opportunities for our youth, not just as aviation mechanics, but everywhere in all those types of facets. So we've been working very closely with them.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a recommendation that we go to the Paris Air Show, because I think we
100%. Can we add that to
Understand
the?
what's-
Add it to the agenda.
We had never been.
Absolutely.
Never been. You can
workshop item.
And it's in June. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Okay,
Road trip.
be our guy.
I wish. Anyway, I can translate for us all. All right.
Great idea. Yeah, no, I am hard won over on this program. My brother-in-law has made his career as a aviation mechanic, and he never lacked for opportunities, because he was certified. So, no, I know that it's a great career path. Have we considered an alternate site?
There really isn't. We started this design 3 years ago, working on this, and as I said in this picture, we invested our money in that site, and other sites really aren't as well suited for it as this. In addition, we're talking about the only issue here is groundwater underneath the site. So if we move 500 feet to another site, it's probably likely that we'll find the same types of testing in the groundwater underneath. I think the most important part is we're not exposing that groundwater at all. So it's kind of an irrelevant issue in my opinion.
Okay, there's another site that's, that we're aware of that, that across the street, I guess. that.
You'd have to have airfield access so that they can work on.
No, no, I know. No, I'm not saying it's better. I'm saying it's worse.
Is that the, are you talking about the Lockheed Martin?
No, no, never mind. I don't want to get into it, but, but there it was dirt, the one I'm talking, but, yeah.
You're
Well, and-
correct, Ms. Foreman. You are correct. There's another situation in question that has soil contamination, which is a different situation than this one. You are correct.
And if we
Wondering how
identify.
we avoided soil contamination on ours, and is there something that will come back later and bite us?
I mean, I'm not the environmental consultant, but since we did all that testing of the soil and it's clean, and we haven't done anything to the soil, the next stuff that's done to the soil is it'll have concrete put over it when they build the hangar. I don't know of any issues there, and where there are soil contaminations, certainly you have to take those out. We do that in different sites when,
Did we test the soil or just the wells?
they
And
test.
that was at phase 2? Yes. Okay, okay. And we don't have the results here on those, right? No, but we can provide them. Okay, yeah, please, okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Spray?
Okay, thank you. It's great, it's a great product. I know the onset of this, when it came about, I was watching on the other side. So I was excited about it then. And to Mr. Tatum's point, I know mechanics, a lot of them that's worked in diesel. Some have had issues with breathing in, gases, fumes from other chemicals and things like that that they work with. But, it's a career choice, and it's something corporations have to take the necessary steps to protect their staff. I think that's what will happen here. There'll be safety measures in place. On the second page, you said that there is a lease term including 3 years of rent abatement value at $225,000. That's saying you're gonna lease, that's kind of like a gift that you're gonna give us for 3 years.
Yes.
What is going to be our rent after that 3 years? That is a huge
the
concern.
agreement.
It's in the, I think, well, if we do the math.
I think
it's
it was
about
73,000, 72, yeah, annually.
Annually. I mean, we're obligated under FAA rules to give fair market value rent to all our tenants, regardless of their status, whether they're government or they're private. But we are able to do some incentives, and one of the things we decided to do is do this 3 years, because it's going to take time for you as an organization to develop the program and get enough students so that the tuition pays those salaries and the rent. And we wanted to be cognizant of that. And as I said, we've put $1.5 million into this project
Right.
as well to help save money for the school. We're trying to be good community members while at the same time having to follow the rules that FAA sets forward.
Well, I think it's a great thing. I mean, one of the county commissioners brags all the time, we have a port and an airport in Manatee County. And I just think this is gonna be, attract more people to our community, I believe. And I think there's a lot of interest in kids getting, and we got the VEX robotics, that's engineering too. And so is maintenance and, all of this is the same, it's all in the STEM to me. I'm excited about this. I'll be happy to go out there and take the first flight out if I had to, because I think it's going to be a good thing. The only thing I was concerned about, and then the staffing, I guess, when the program, Mr. Wagner, I guess I'm asking you, or Dr. G, when the program does get up, then you will be providing the staffing, we will be providing the staffing. How is that going to work? I'm just curious.
Yes.
I didn't get into that part of the plan years ago. I just knew that this was coming down the line. I just want to see, okay, we got the money from the government. You did 1.5 million of the initial work and the design, and we're getting 3 years of lease abatement. After we're all built, we're gonna build it. Who's gonna staff it? we
Yep.
are?
And so we had talked about this is a partnership program with Suncoast Technical College. That's the Sarasota School District Manatee Technical College. So it's
Okay.
it's us, and then they call theirs Suncoast Technical College. So this is going to be a joint project with them as well. And so because we don't want to have two separate aviation programs competing, so they'll be working together in that, and so the cost would be shared with them as well, and we'd share the students and the cost associated with the instructor and the tools and the equipment and, tuition. So this is actually built out to serve both counties. That's why it is so exciting.
And then start maybe marketing to maybe some businesses to start offering grants to students that want to.
Absolutely, and that's what Mr. Piccolo had talked about. There are so many jobs available, so many
Right.
careers in this area. So we don't think we're going to have a shortage of students to sign up for it. We think we're going to have ample students who want to stay here locally and go to a public technical college to get their training.
I will say I've had 2 people approach me already that say when the school starts, I want to offer a scholarship.
Awesome. Okay.
I think the biggest thing you'll face in the next decade is that the demand will be so high that you'll be evaluating how you double the size of the school.
Yeah, that's,
I remember, Ms. Bray, the students generate funding that pays for the teacher. That's how all of the programs are paid for at the technical college. So really, once you have enough students, it will pay for the cost to offer it there. It's just instead of it being on State Road 70, it'll be listed there. The money from the state, we're hoping will pay for the hangar, and so it shouldn't be a real big expense for the district. It really should be cost neutral. It should generate enough cost to run it.
And remember, if I can just add on to what the superintendent's talking about, so remember 80% of our students go to our technical colleges are on some type of aid. So the Pell Grant, for instance, no one pays that back. That comes money from the federal government. So this would qualify for that program. It's 1,350 hours for each segment of this program. In addition, Career Source Suncoast services both Manatee and Sarasota, and they fund both technical colleges also. So this program should
pay for itself. then.
pay for itself. If you can't, it depends on the person's financial need, but there are grants available and Pels and Suncoast money as well.
So this design is for 3 hangars, then, from what I see here, is it 3 hangars?
2 hangars.
2, okay. Okay. Pretty nice looking.
Thank you.
That's all I have, thank you.
So I think I'm the only one that was here when it first came about, because this was Dr. Hopes's baby.
Yep.
I really think it was because he had an airplane and wanted it
I think you're
to
right.
get repaired cheaply, but whatever, it's his baby and it's a good idea, so we'll give him the credit for that. I want to make sure he gets credit.
He did a lot of work with us.
He did. So I got to give him credit, and I want to make sure that's stated. But other than that, I just want to thank everyone for all of their due diligence, and going through everything and presenting us the information in transparency, and I just really appreciate that. And I think that's really important. So that's really all I had to say. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate the due diligence. I appreciate the extra time and testing you guys have done and shown us. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. We truly appreciate it, and we're excited about hopefully this opportunity.
Same. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That concludes that portion of the first presentation there. We'll move on to, actually, let's go ahead. Does board, yeah, you're good. Does anyone want to take a recess? I know it's an hour and a half.
Then we
Yeah.
can switch.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. All right, we are back from recess and moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is elementary, middle, and high school staffing plans for the next school year, 23-24. And we have Ms. Saunders, who is presenting. Also, Ms. Sellers will help as well with the staffing plan. So take it away.
Absolutely. All right, the first thing we want to discuss is where do we begin? We start with our projected enrollment. So remember, we're building our staffing plan from conversations that occur in January based on what we hypothesize that will show up in August, even before you have a budget formulated. So it is a convoluted system, but that is the system that we all live in. As you will see, our district, and I've just shown a few years, in my tenure here, over 10 years, we've grown approximately 10,000 students. Other than the 2021 school year, which you saw a slight dip, remember that was the dip of COVID, we have had a steady increase each year, and we're projected that next year we will be over, our growth will be over 1,000 students, and that will put us over 53,000 combined students. So steadily growing. If we have a increase of over 1,000, that's really roughly about the size of a middle school. So this is the beginning of our budget cycle process. Our next workshop will be June 2nd, which will be our 5-year capital plan. Our capital plan will go hand in hand with this plan because you will see the steady increase of growth and then what we have to do from that to accommodate the growth. So you've received your books now for a couple of weeks. I'm hoping that you will find it very transparent. It is formula based. We've used this system here for about 9 years now. And so that it's not up to individual request, but it completely follows a formula, and it's based off the class size amendment. We know that K to 3, the student class size is 18, grades 4 to 8 is 22, and high school courses are 25, 1 to 25. And remember, this is just for core classes. So we do try to adhere to that. We try to make sure we're meeting the class size amendment, but that is the basis of the formula that you see. You will see a little differing formulas from elementary to secondary. And this slide's just giving you an overall example of what each of them will see. The class size amendment I spoke about is in there. But you will notice that each of the schools have art, music. They have a STEM teacher, and that's part of our referendum initiative. Some have ESOL resource teachers based on need and population. And they also have, of course, PE. And based on how many students are enrolled will depend on how many PE teachers or aides or so forth that they receive. We all have media center support staff, counselors, student support specialists, which are really, in secondary, they're called deans in some cases. But those are the individuals that support the administration with student discipline. And you will see principal, assistant principal, and coordinators based on size of school. In some elementary, our basic count is 1 AP, 1 assistant principal, 1 principal. But in some cases, based on high need Title I or based on size, they could have 2 assistant principals or a principal and a coordinator and so forth. So we do end up giving additional staff where you have high need populations, but this does not count on this basic formula. Doesn't count any grant. So if you're a Title I school and you have additional money, you're able to use that money to buy staff. Those are additional. This basic allocation does not include ESE staff, because again, that's based on, those are additional units based on the number of students there, and their IEPs generate that. So this is our basic formula that we start. The title, grants, and the ESE allocations are added on top of this. So we also provide clerical staff. We've increased that over time. Again, it's all formula generated. And those are paraprofessionals. Again, ESE paraprofessionals are tied to those depending on IEP and student needs, as well as ESOL paraprofessionals. Those allocations are done by those departments. We sit and pull the projected enrollment, and based on their number of ESOL students or ESE students, we give them additional staff that warrants those. Each school has a classroom substitute. We put that in place in years past to help fill the gap that if you have those emergency situations where a teacher has to take a doctor's appointment, maybe coming in late, leaving early, we have a person immediately that can fill those positions. But we also contract with that as well. That's certainly not enough to staff the whole school, but we do have an immediate person to be there to assist. Guidance clerks, of course, help the guidance counselors with keeping up with student records, making appointments. Registrars are the individuals that do all the registering of students and entering the data of students. So when test scores come in, records come in, they're the ones that make sure that data is put into our system, into focus, and it's populated for everyone. We assign, and I'm going to tell you, not all districts are this way, but the nursing allocation has always been very important in Manatee County. So they provide nurses, LPNs, and clinic aides in every one of the schools. We partner with the health department, and they used to provide some staff that filled in some of those positions. And based on their shortages of positions, they are now providing fewer and fewer people. They do the training, they go and help certify that we're in compliance, but they're really not staffing our schools anymore. They're completely staffed and funded by our general budget. We also provide custodial units, and those are based on a formula of square footage. So those will be added as well as food service. Middle school and high school is going to be a little bit different because that's where you see elective courses. So the basic funding for our core teachers is the same, but you also now will have a number of career and technical programs. So we have a bunch of elective courses that are offered there. So that's really the main differential in the middle school from the elementary school. They have the same type of support staff that elementary does as well. You will not see as many general paraprofessionals in middle or high school. Most of those classrooms do not have a teacher aide. That is predominantly, other than an ESC or an ESOL, those are predominantly seen more in an elementary setting and not in a secondary setting. High school is going to look very, very similar to middle school, except you will see larger numbers. So most of them are going to have 4 counselors, a minimum of 3. Those things are based on every 500 students. So all of it is formula driven. You can see what that formula is. So we put in what their student count is, and it automatically populates how many teachers they will receive, how many clerical, how many support staff, etc. Any questions so far on how we compute the different levels of allocations?
Ms. Messenger?
I had one. I think I've talked to you about it before, but it's not in here yet so far. And it was about ESC class size ratios. and I just wanted to know how that was determined for like a self-contained unit. I mean, I understand push in, pull out, whatever, but when it comes to
Self-contained.
self-contained, what is the typical class size ratio that the district uses to determine that?
I can tell you there isn't one set by the state like it is for a basic core class size.
Yeah, that's a complaint I got from schools, so that's why I want to know how the how the district views that.
We try to staff, if you're self-contained, a ratio of 1 to 12 or 1 to 15, honestly. We kind of do the same thing for pre-K, but remember there's no staffing there either because we are K to 12. But we also have classes that we know 1 to 12 would not be acceptable. So based on the severity of the class, some are staffed 1 to 5, 1 to 3.
Okay, I think that might be appropriate for some, so that's why I just wanted to understand
Absolutely.
how that was determined.
So, but let me tell you how we start. So we make the formula, we do the allocations based on projections. We know, and some of you will experience this, the big first number on a school year is the 10-day count. At the 10-day count, we go back in and evaluate because the state never gives you all of your money in one fell check for 53,000 students. They do it in chunks. So 10-day count, you go back in and you reassess. So we could have made these formulas and we could have said that's what the ratio in a perfect world based on the projection. But in reality, when the 10-day comes, inevitably, we're pretty good, but inevitably, there could be a couple of schools that have a larger enrollment. There could be a few schools that have a lesser enrollment. So at the 10-day count, we will make an adjustment. We will go through and now repopulate all the allocation sheets because it's a formula based on the reality of who really showed up and not who we thought's coming, but actual person that has showed up, physical body. If you're not there physically, you're deleted, you're removed, and then we have a whole process for figuring out, did you move out of town? Where are you? But physical being, and we make a shift. What we tend to find, so it's level by the 10-day. Unfortunately, in some cases, as the school year goes, we could get enrollments from children from other places that may have an IEP that needs to be in a self-contained location. And those class sizes get a little bit bigger. I give them another unit, give them an aid with the unit. But as we know, when you get past July, it is very, very difficult sometimes to staff and find people to take those positions. So sometimes as the school year progresses, the numbers will change, and not because we've not allocated, but because you can't find folks in some cases. So we do see ourselves faced with that each year.
Sure, and I'm sure that happens. I know, like, when I visit schools, like, if I'm at a school and they have 9 in an ASD unit, I'm like,
Yeah, those we try to staff at 5.
right, that's, I mean.
And a para. So a minimum of 2 adults with 5 children in some of our more severe, needs. So it is probably one of our biggest challenges. What we've done, we've increased our TPG contract this year, which is where we go and recruit teachers from out of country. And I will tell you the majority of the ones we're looking for are ESE certified because we know that we are not going to have enough people in this at the 10-day count to cover all those positions. That's just been the forecast we've seen. So we try to hire more in that regard so that we can make sure that at least at the beginning we can staff it. I will tell you another thing that I had to do last year, and I may have to do that again this year, is, and they take class size as an average of the district. So we're able to meet the class size because we staff with a lot of extra support added into our basic formula. But if I see, right now, we have about 136 teacher vacancies. It's not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible. I will pay close attention to that. We have a number of job fairs between now and the end of June. But mid-June, if I look like that number is heavy, some of you may remember what I did last year is I bumped up the class size by 2. So instead of 1 to 18, it's 1 to 20, 1 to 24, 1 to 27. We will not shift any people until after the 10-day count. But they'll have their Plan A allocation sheet. They all say draft because they really are draft. And they will have Plan B staffing sheet so that if you have Plan B, do you have enough people hired that are certified that are ready to start the beginning of the school year? I would much rather have a class with a certified teacher, with 2 extra kids in the class, and we're talking gen ed, we're not talking the ESE one, then I would stick to 1 to 18, and I'm starting out of the gate with substitutes. So just know that that is a practice that we did last year. It served us well. I don't know that we're going to have to do that, but if it does not look like, if we have some gaps, significant gaps, mid June, we will go and redo this. You won't see people shift till the 10-day, but at the 10-day, and why is that? Because we do have some schools that are completely staffed, some that aren't. So I don't want to pull anybody from school A to go to school B. And then what happens if on the 10-day they've got even more people and needed those teachers anyway? So we won't shift them yet. But that's how we will close that gap so that we can start the year with all the classes full. So we will be able to accomplish that doing just that one formula adjustment. So I don't think Leslie's not here. Leslie is, she handles the formula, the allocation. She's the allocation specialist. So she came to us from Martin County. She did a similar job there. And it's pretty simple. It's a formula. It's a spreadsheet. You populate myself, her, and Don Sauer, who works in the Student Information Center. He's the one we work together to forecast the big number, and then we roll in by grade, by school on the projections, and then she takes it and populates it into this formula. So that's really the process. I'm going to give you just some basic highlights, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel because she's really going to tell you what does that mean from one year to the next. How have we come to the increase of cost? Because if I were you, that's what you're going to really want to know. What's this new staffing formula going to cost us, and why did we come up with that number?
Yeah, there's still questions. Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Spray?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
At the 10-day count, when you're saying moving people, you're
Yes.
saying you're moving staff from one school to another because this school might have more students than projected.
You are correct.
Okay. Do you have any kind of history? Could you produce some history on, okay, we over-projected here, under-projected? How many people did you have to move in 21 to 22? How many did you have to move in 22, 23? That kind of,
Sure.
yeah.
Mr. What will get it? I believe last year we moved 8.
Okay.
We're pretty close on our projections, so you're not going to see a huge transfer, but generally there's a little bit. But we'll give you the last 3 years
Okay.
of the transfer, and it applies to teachers and paras. It's all based on union contract language. So there's a process. It's based on seniority. It first starts with volunteers. It could be that, some teacher may say, okay, I'm willing to go, and then they're able to pick where the vacancies are and make a selection. So it's done pretty quick. Our goal is to get our classes settled and staffed and moving forward as quickly as possible. So, but yeah, sometimes you'll hear some
I have.
people that don't want to move. And, but this is what I'll tell you. If they're having to move, it's because that school did not generate enough money for them to remain because they didn't have enough students. It's the only way that you can keep a balanced budget. You can't let them stay if it doesn't generate enough students for that teacher. And in this climate, you need them to move because you'll have some vacancies. So you certainly don't want a school to be overstaffed per se, and then others that are understaffed. But you really want to be as accurate as you can because no one likes to be forced. I think Mr. Choate lived in that world where he was moved from one and went to another school once upon a time. It's never ideal. And generally the one that gets cut is the last person hired. So, yeah, it's not a pleasant experience, but that is the why that it comes about. It's all based on funding.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had. I wasn't sure.
First, I want to thank Ms. Sellers for the extra information in our book. It was very helpful.
I like that. Good.
When was the last time we reviewed these staff allocations, the ratios, and determined whether they were sufficient?
Well, we've been audited.
No, I'm talking about I'm not talking audit, I'm talking, teachers, schools have got, it's a different environment than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. If we allocate counselors based on 10 years ago, we might be understaffing. If, I know we need more paras, you know, so to stick with a ratio that we have not challenged and asked ourselves, is this what we want? Is this a good model?
I can tell you we've adjusted that ratio formula for the support people in the last 5 years. We've added more paras and counselors. We shrunk the number per. But I will tell you, some of that has been funded by ESSER. And I will tell you that probably next year, you're going to see it go back to prior. So we've added more counselors and paras and student support specialists and so forth over the last 3-4 years. I just caution that you may see formulas back prior to that in a year. So we have done those supports in the last few years.
I looked at
Yeah.
this and the 2 years prior, and they're identical.
Yeah, we'll go back 3 or
Is it
4 years.
possible to get
Absolutely.
a copy of what it was, say, 5 years ago,
Sure.
pre-COVID?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because that's where we added, and because we had extra money, we went and added for those supports, specifically for guidance counselors. You'll see that for classroom subs, for support people, but some of that could end up changing
Yeah.
back in a year.
I'd like to see what that was.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think the only thing, going back and even, I think we'd all probably say we'd love to have more paras and guidance and everything, but where do you, in the money we're given, where do you cut? You're going to have to cut something to add more of those. We just don't have enough money for it. So is that something you were looking for in that? What did we have before?
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm asking that
I'm
question
looking
right.
at it for two reasons. One is pre-ESSER and what we're doing now. And then I'm also looking at it in terms of supporting different needs in the schools. We've got more behavior problems than we used to have. we need more counselors. We got kids that, because of various reasons, but, you know, high anxiety, you know, just, they're dealing with a lot of mental health issues that maybe we had them 5 years ago, but I don't think we had them 10 years ago. So,
Agreed.
you know, so I just want to make sure that we are staffing appropriately, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Tanner, do you have anything?
Yes, a few questions. Good morning.
Good morning.
SROs, some of at the elementary school, it says contracted personnel, and then for middle schools, it says contracted personnel, and for the high school, it says contracted personnel shared expenses. How many of those are guardians and how many are sheriffs? Do we still do that? And how do we
We
decide
do. Elementary, and if it says that's a typo, we'll need to correct. In our elementary schools, they're all guardians.
Okay.
And those are our employees.
that? Right.
So, but in middle and high, we contract based on the law enforcement agency of where the school is. So many of the police departments or sheriff's department, we contract with some of their staff. In some cases, if there's more than one, based on the number, remember in statute, it's 1 per 1,000 is what you're, suggested that you keep your ratio at. So in many cases, I may have an SRO, which would be law enforcement, paired up with a guardian at a middle or a high school. So it is shared expenses, and we have a different contract with each of the agencies on what our portion of the cost is and what their portion of the cost is. They're not our employee, but they work for us a portion of their contract year, so we pay a portion of that. And the board will approve, those contracts come before the board annually, and you'll be getting those contracts in the next month or so.
Okay. So at elementary schools, we have our employees who are
Correct.
called guardians,
Correct.
who are highly trained and
Yes.
have to meet certain specifications, but there are employees. And then at middle schools, we have a law enforcement officer.
They're shared. It depends. It depends on how many. All of them have, most of them have an SRO, but, or they could have a guardian, but depending on the size of the middle school, if it's over 1,000, they could have two. So there could be an SRO and a guardian. Like our high schools could have 3. One could be an SRO, 2 could be a guardian. So it just depends on the school.
So when you use the word school resource officer, that means law enforcement officer?
That is correct.
And the middle schools all have an SRO today, or,
No, some do, some have a guardian, it just depends.
and the high schools all have SROs, or?
All of them have at least one of the staff, but they could have guardians as well.
Okay.
Right,
Just a question that comes up with the public sometimes.
sure.
So I
Sure.
need to get smart on that. Let's see. What exactly are paraprofessional duties? What are their duties of a paraprofessional?
It depends. They're instructional support. If you're an ESOL paraprofessional, then you're there supporting your ESOL students. If you're an ESE paraprofessional, it depends. Some are assigned to just one student. They're assigned to them all day long to help with their needs, academic and sometimes otherwise. But most of them are instructional that work with a number of students. So if we definitely have many that are in kindergarten, shared within the elementary ring, secondary, sometimes we have some tied to intensive reading classes, but they're support of the teacher where they can help kids in a small group setting. So they are instructional support. And that's what they do. They aid the teacher and the student
In various ways, depending
in
on
various
the
ways.
classes where they're-
Right.
Okay. Next question is, I wouldn't say I was involved in a discussion. I should probably get this. I wasn't involved in a discussion, but I saw a discussion about PE classes, and there was some concern about whether the students every year are getting the required amount of minutes per week or something like that. Are you pretty confident that we're in compliance with that? Because some other school systems thought maybe the kids were getting shorted based on state law, but I don't know. you think that's an issue? And
We run our PE here in two facets. We do have PE teachers, but they're not the only ones providing the minutes to make the required statutory requirement of minutes for PE. I believe it's 150 minutes now. So what happens is in elementary, the elementary teachers are also certified for PE. So the extra days that the PE teacher in their rotation does not have them for PE, then that homeroom teacher has to pick up activities for them to make up the other minutes. And it is scheduled out in the master schedule.
okay, just
But that's how we're able to satisfy it.
okay, great. And then finally, a lot of the positions that you were talking about before, based on ESSER money, unfortunately, those are going to slowly be coming off the books over the next 2 years.
You are correct.
And those are typically paraprofessional type. What categories will most of those come
Well,
from, do you think?
in this next slide, you will see some of that in slide 10. These are the highlights of what we changed. We added some, additional basic teachers, and we put some things in for with the arts millage money. But you will see this year we were paying for high school and middle school guidance counselors out of ESSER. And we were also paying for the classroom subs out of ESSER. So that equated to almost $6 million. So those personnel, we had some personnel that we were paying this past year for ESSER that we had to remove positions from. We're going back to some formulas from before. You will see it the next year on the elementary side more than the secondary side. But these are now being paid for out of the general fund bucket again. And as you can see, we're doing some attrition of lab managers and so forth. You won't feel a big hit, but we had a $13 million swing of personnel that was being paid out of ESSER that's got to come back. So we took half of it this year to build the budget, and half of it will have to come next year. So next year in the elementary realm, we had changed the formula and added extra guidance counselors, because once upon a time, a few years ago, for the most part, elementary just had one guidance counselor. The ratio was about 1 to 750, 1 to 600. We shrunk it 1 to 500. So we had added a bunch of extra staff, but once that money goes away, you can still keep that formula ratio, but how much is that going to cost the general fund balance? So what my suggestion will be, you'll run it both ways. Can you keep it staffed the way it is? Do you have enough money? If you don't, then you got to go back and run the formula pre-COVID. And then if that's the case, you'll have to reduce staff. One thing I will tell you, we have guidance counselor vacancies. We have behavior tech vacancies. In some case, I've got about 80 paraprofessional vacancies. I can give people more units. If you can't find staff to fill them, it doesn't matter.
No, that makes sense.
Right.
You can put the positions on the books and you can fund them, but
Yeah.
foreign bodies have to show up to occupy.
But this one really does kind of summarize in a net summary of what was different. And then you will see from this how that had the cost differential. Our cost from last year's staffing to this year's staffing is a little more than $12 million
Okay.
on personnel of schools. So I believe this is the spot where I'm going to turn it back over. This I just gave you. I'll do this real quick before she gets into the money. I just wanted you to see this slide 11 shows you what the schools receive. So you can see on the 10-day count, but over there in red and in the far left, it gives the previous allocation. So and then if there's any change, it's in the footnotes. So as you can see, you know, it's going to tell you how many students were there before and how many students are there now. And then on the 10-day count, it will show a differential as well. And then on slide 12, if it generates an extra unit based on the number, then it'll have a +1, +2, etc. As you will see, Harvey from last year to this year grew by 7 basic units. And again, it's formula generated. A 0.5 kicks it up to another unit.
So as you're talking about units, and that we can definitely probably talk about this with like music in middle school, things like that. You don't generate enough for a full unit in one class. Can one school take 0.5, another school take 0.5, where you'd have a teacher essentially, and we do this I think currently, teacher essentially going from one middle school for the first 3 periods, they got a break, they go to another middle school for the last 3 periods.
Sure. And what you will see in that summary sheet, we did add some additional units in our arts field and in chorus. Some didn't generate enough for a whole elective, so they have a shared unit. So yes, it's not ideal. If you have a shortage of vacancies already, many people are not going to opt to pick the shared one because you're going from one school to the next, etc. But we have done that in the past sometimes when we had small schools. Anna Marie and Stewart used to have shared people. Palmview and Myakka used to have shared people. We really try to do away with that if possible because it's hard to get staff willing to do it. But we've done it this next year for some of those elective units to have at least start generating some of those in that way. But yes, 100%.
While we're on that topic, because I did look to see what got added in the arts, and the only one I saw was an additional art teacher at Palmview. I don't see any others.
We have some shared ones. Let's see if I can go backwards. Where's my backspace? Yes, we added 3 art, orchestra, and chorus, but we have a number of shared ones in multiple secondary schools based on their student request. I can get that for you.
Okay, yeah, because it's not, you know, I specifically looked for that. And I'll express it now. You know, we talked about it last year that we need more more courses, more electives, more teachers. We need to be adding teachers, not supplies.
Right.
And 3, I question whether that's in the spirit of what we told our voters when we went out for the referendum. We're going to have to go sell this thing again. And if all we're doing is adding 3 teachers, I think it's, I'm not happy about that. I think every middle school needs to have band, orchestra, chorus. They need to have theater, you know, and certainly every high school needs to have theater and dance.
Now, the board can certainly say that's a standard other than 1 art, 1 music, 1 PE, because everybody has at least 1. But remember, each teacher in middle school carries 132 students. That's a staff. So you only have so many students to populate the electives. So when you give them PE, art, music, and then we want to add on additional VEX robotics, dance, chorus, theater, it all dwindles down, and you can't have a class of 5. You can't staff it. So that's what the issue is. What I can do is I will show you their master schedules. You've got this many, they put the kids in, and that's how you generate the money to pay for X amount of teachers. So if you give them more teachers than that, then you're pulling those kids out of those other classes, which you can, but then that teacher may be carrying their full-time load, could be 57 kids. And your math teacher is carrying 132 or 150 kids, because that's how you're paying, that's how the money's being generated to pay for that teacher. So that is the issue. It will only afford so many elective classes, and that's why in secondary, it is generated by the student interest. They say, this is what I want to take, it populates that teacher, it populates that class. So we did add some shared, because they only had enough requests for 50 or 60. So we gave them a half unit to get it started, but they didn't generate enough to pay for a full-time teacher.
No, and I like the shared, you know, that solves a lot of problems, but I don't want the taxpayers going, because we can't fill these classes, wait, you know, you raised our taxes so that, for something that we don't need, you know, or even want, you know, so, that's a concern to me, but also, we have a task force, right? That, you
Sure
know,
do.
okay, I would dearly love to hear what they wanted, what their recommendations were. You know, because if you took a look at, you know, their pie in the sky when they first, you know,
Right.
when they came up with $15 million or whatever, they had intentions of adding a lot more teachers than.
That's how we got the one, they brought the course requests from the schools and said these generated these extra units, so those were placed. Now, I've not seen all the minutes for other items, but we can certainly get you that information.
Okay, because last year too, you sent us their 3-year plan, and year 2 was, I pulled it out, but,
Going to people.
they were anticipating a lot more in classroom instruction in these areas. You know, I can pull it out, but, I do think we need to reconsider what's here.
My question, to be in just a dialogue with you about that staffing portion, I guess it's really like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So like, do we say, no, we're adding chorus, orchestra, band teachers, and they sit there for 3 periods with no kids, but we got them, they're there? Or do we wait till the kids are there to then add them? I don't know the answer. I'm not saying I know the answer. I don't think that the answer is we got to hire more teachers in that realm if the interest is not there. Right. But that goes back to a whole nother topic of, you know, you used to have a wheel where you went through. You don't have that anymore. That's based on some state stuff. So you had a wheel where you said, oh, well, back when I was in school, you only had like 4 or 5 different choices, right? The 3 music and home ec and a tech, typing or whatever. So you went through those and you chose, okay, well, I want to do X, Y, Z. Well, you knew you were going to have a full unit for math or for all orchestra, et cetera, because there was so little of choices. I don't know. I'm not saying I know the answer, but I don't think it's hiring teachers when there's no kids to go in there.
Okay, I'm looking at their year 2, goal 8, provide funding for additional positions at the school level. Example, step 1, January, approach targeted schools with recommendations for additional staff and programs. Step 2, in March, distribute allocations based off student interest. Potential idea to jumpstart programs would be to support positions that are split between 2 schools. Because if you don't offer it, you're never going to have it.
Sure.
You Step 3, assist with the hiring process and teacher orientation. And step 4, continue to support new hires throughout the school year. So,
But I think we
I can
did.
tell you they did
We
do
did
that.
1 and 2. We did offer.
They did that.
I saw the sheet. My child, they offered the sheet to say, "What do you want?" And then when they got those back, if the kids all said, then that at that point you respond to the third bullet or whatever, which is hiring, the hiring part. But they did January and March, like
Did they?
offering and stuff. But
Yeah.
I would
you
like to
just
see the
Get the
results.
numbers back.
They did, and these generated full ones, but then they did half units based on some of the requests. And we are paying for those half ones through the millage. It didn't have enough, but it's shared. And then the task force is charged finding people now that are willing to go and do those shared positions, because those are.
I'd love to be able to find a way that we can use it to do wheel again, because I think that that is an essential thing we are missing. 6th graders have no clue what they want to do. 12th graders, I got one, don't know clue what they want to do. So like I think we are hamstringing ourselves because we can't create those if they don't even know what does orchestra do. If they never go through a wheel, they don't know. So why would you sign up for something you don't know about?
Right. And if they don't
You
get
know?
orchestra in middle school, they're not going to be involved in orchestra in
High school? No,
No,
for sure.
you know, you got to get them early and young to develop that skill set. You know, and you take a look at in the high school level, the theater. I mean, when you look at the arts and music at Parish Community High School, they have 2. They're the only ones that have 2 music teachers, 2, allocated. And we saw what that resulted in. You know, I mean,
Well, the principals get their they get their elective units. The schools dictate what they offer. In secondary, it's not dictated by the district. They offer what the students want to take and then create the course and hire the teacher. We don't tell them. They have to have at least PE, they have to have at least 1 art, music, but we do not beyond that. If all of their students that went to that school wanted to just take art, that's what all of their electives would be. It's not determined or set by the district office.
but because of the referendum, did we dictate to middle schools and high schools an increase in STEM?
We added one in the elementary schools that did not have it to add, because elementary only had art, music, and PE. So we gave them a 4th option. For secondary, no. If a school wanted to add it because their students wanted robotics, then we went and we added that program for them. But we didn't dictate that they had to do STEM in middle or high.
Just to expand, respectfully disagree that we have to have arts in every school. It's supply and demand. If you don't have the demand to have orchestra at a middle or elementary or even a high school level, why have an orchestra department? So I understand
I'm
your
not talking about
concern.
elementary.
I understand, but I understand where you're coming from. On the referendum, we put it out there. This is what we're gonna do. They came in with a glossy picture of what we're gonna ask the taxpayers that we want this money for this program. But are we producing the students to back it up? In my opinion, I don't think so. I think there are some schools that have stepped up, and some schools just don't have there's only so many hours a day that you can take, electives. So you gotta do all this other stuff, and your reward is this art program or chorus or orchestra or a STEM. So I don't think that we have to have a huge art program of any sorts it doesn't have to be carbon copy to every school. It's just supply and demand. So we did we did go out for the millage for the arts. And I question how much of it is going to arts based on what was presented to the voters. So I think they probably are getting shortchanged, in my opinion. However, I do think that some programs have far exceeded what was expected, which is the reviews from the Frozen was great in every article I read. I'm like, wow, I'm so sorry I didn't get to go see that. But I don't think that we should have elaborate arts program in every middle and high school. Some kids are very art driven. Some kids are very sports driven. If I would compare the two programs in arts and sports, I would say you probably have more kids involved in sports than arts. It's just, my experience has been that way. But I get where you're coming from, Ms. Foreman, but I also understand that if you don't have the demand, you don't need the teacher for it, so that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Mrs. Messenger. Yes.
I just don't, this is a tangent, because this is not now about allocations, but I really don't want to miss allowing some of the stuff that just was said to sit on the table as it was, so I really feel like I have to say something. When we first talked about this millage and how it was going to be spent, it was never my understanding that it would be spent on people. That was not what we sold the community. We did not say, hey, we're going to hire a whole bunch of people. What we said was we are going to improve and enrich our arts programs. That may not be people. I've had this conversation before. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again because I want to make it really clear. I don't believe the board as a body ever gave a direction one way or another on which way we wanted the district to go, other than to improve and enrich the programs. I think we all have different opinions on what that is. But I don't think the board has ever made that decision and said, we want it to be people. That to me does not necessarily enrich an art program. We had schools that have had instruments that were there since the school was built. They are decades old. That costs a lot of money to fix, repair, buy new ones. We had schools that needed sheet music, theaters that need screenplay things. I don't know. I'm not into theater, but like you have to buy that licensing. If you, like when we did Frozen, they had to buy the licensing to be able to film it, and then whomever made money off of that. So it takes money, not just people, to make the art programs better, deeper, and richer. And I go back to, I was always into visual arts. So paints, clay, kilns, glasswork. I mean, I took stained glass, all those different things. That takes money, not just teachers. That takes training for the teachers, not just materials. I also, theaters, you talked about Parrish. Not all of our theaters look that nice. I mean, Parrish is brand new. They got a whole bunch of fancy stuff. Not all of them have all that fancy stuff. That takes money, not just people. So the concept of, well, we're not going to be able to show the community, they can walk into our schools and watch the art our students are producing and see, this is where it's gone. I mean, I went to Arts Alive this past year, and the art was the best I've ever seen from this district. And if you don't think that this investment by the community created that, it has. Because you've had better trained teachers, better quality teachers, better materials, better, so many in different ways. So I just want to make it clear that this is not just about people. It is about all those other aspects in order to make the art program an enriched and better program. Would I like to see it expand? Yeah, obviously. I'd love to see more offerings, but it is going to be driven by students. And one pocket might say, if Parrish has a phenomenal theater teacher, which they do, well, you're going to have more people that go, oh, I heard Miss Pana's class is awesome, and I'm going to take her class. You're going to have that. I mean, I think about Manatee High and Mr. Olson, right? So, I mean, like, everybody loved taking Mr. Olson. took piano from him, right? Like that was a neat thing. Are all schools able to offer that? No. It might be a specialized thing. I don't think it's a reasonable expectation that every single school is going to have every single program. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation, nor do I think that that's really benefits the students or the community, because then you're spending all your resources on having all those things rather than enriching the ones that are there to make them better and stronger. So I would much rather focus on making those ones there better and stronger than going, well, everybody, you get a teacher, and you get a teacher, and you get a teacher. How about you get what you need to ensure that you have the sheet music to teach that awesome piano class that your kids want? I would much rather focus on that than all the teachers. And I'm sorry that went off on a tangent. I couldn't let that one sit. Thank you.
Well, I do believe the audit, or the Citizens Financial Committee will be giving a report to show what was spent. Remember, the arts part is a portion of the millage. It's not the whole mill was supposed to be on arts. I believe it was about 2.7 million. And we will show how it was spent. And we will make sure that when they do that report, they talk about what we're doing next year on people so that the board will have that. And the board will have the sheets so that they can satisfy and show that they did. I saw them. I required that they did it. Jeremiah went, did all the course requests, showed me what it was, and if it generated a unit, they got it. If it was a half unit, then it was a shared unit. But in many cases, you have 700, 800 kids, it's only going to generate so many teachers. And the principal, based on the student's request, decides these are the types of courses we're going to offer. So that is the process. But we did expand. I do believe that they fulfilled what they said they were going to do, in my opinion. But I'll make sure when that report is given that those elements are also put in there.
Thank you. I believe you said it was Miss Sellers next.
Yes, she's going to talk. I'm going to just skip because this is just showing, again, what you have in your book.
What page you going to start on?
I'm going to start on 18, and she's going to tell you about the three basic elements of why it increased in cost this year.
Thank you.
Good morning. Okay, so this is about the increased cost differential that's affecting this 23-24 staffing plan. We had three major things that did affect it. Number one was that FRS rate. It had increased to 13.57% this year. That's an increase of $5 million. So that's a total budgeted cost of $40.4 million in the general fund. And number two, we had a staff increase of 133 units, teachers, and this was based on a 1,200 student increase, which was a total cost of $12.3 million. And when I move on to some of the other slides, this is more summarized on slide 24, so we'll get there soon. The third one had to do with the ESSER adjustment. That was $5.3 million for staff that were moved from the ESSER fund. It's now going to get charged back to the general fund. Remember, she had just mentioned that was a grand total of $13 million, splitting it up in half over the course of the next 2 years. Those positions were for the middle school and the high school certified school counselors and the classroom subs. Okay, so this slide also is in your book on page 82 if you needed to get a bit more specific. This shows the major differences in the fringe benefits. It was 19.56% in 22-23, and it's increased to 21.22% in 23-24. For the instructional units, there was added 47 additional teachers, and that difference in cost was $6.8 million. That's with the fringe benefits. which is the ESSER differential dollar change and the growth of 1,200 students. This goes on to highlight a few more areas as part of the instructional. Now, starting on slide 22 and 23, which is also on page 85 in your book, the non-instructional positions had 39 substitutes decreased, which this shows where we built them in, and the change is now paid from the general fund. Now, there's other funds like grants that cover this too. We're highlighting the general fund at this point in this presentation. Now, to summarize, the three primary reasons that we see an increase in costs, and you can kind of follow the second to the last column over on the right-hand side, unit change. We had new growth of 47 units in instructional staff. We moved 52 positions of certified school counselors that were funded from the ESSER funds back to the general fund, and 39 units of the non-instructional classroom subs, also from the ESSER funds back to the general fund as well. Now, the rest of these slides, this part was added at the request, I believe, of last year's presentations to make sure that we, besides going through the instructional division, we go on to the other divisions like operations, business. So we've included in these other slides the instructional division. There's a lot more detail that is inside of your books, so we didn't want to put a whole bunch of them here. We're highlighting a few of the main areas in the instructional area. But again, in your book is a much more detailed area or for these particular positions.
Just real quick, just since we're right here on this, and I think I've got my answer, but I want to make sure. Yeah, I see the one. So I just want to make sure. Obviously, we don't have a deputy superintendent of instruction right now.
Right,
But that
but
will
the
be something
unit
to
and the
add.
funding is-
So I saw it. The one down the next page. Okay, good.
Right, right, exactly. So we have our instructional chart to show you the positions that should be there. And this slide 27, just to highlight that position, but this is a pretty big area, so we didn't pull a lot of that into this slide presentation. We just refer you over to the notebook. Now in operations, we've got the number of positions that are in Mr. Wagner's area. Now here's some of the cost changes. Again, the FRS rate is assisting with that bigger increase in the department. Also business services. And in business services, I'm over 7 positions. We've got our finance, budget, purchasing, and payroll, and I've also got the Medicaid specialist and the allocations one, who is Leslie Baker, who did a very large part of helping put this presentation together along with our budget director, Gina Malinak. Do you guys have any questions of me? I know that Ms. Saunders carried quite a bit of that.
Yeah, we'll have questions, Mrs. Foreman.
Yeah. First of all, on the org chart for operating, we don't have maintenance and transportation and some of the other departments,
So
on the org chart.
that's underneath Mr. Rinaldi's unit.
Oh, okay.
Operations.
Okay.
So
So-
transportation's in there, and so is maintenance.
Okay, so all the direct reports to Mr. Wagner are what's on the organization chart? Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we have a maintenance and transportation departments. We had talked about, Mr. Wagner and I had, touched on this. For human resources, have we given consideration to hiring a recruiter? Someone dedicated to that position?
Yeah, we have. So we do have the allocation for a recruiter.
It's in here?
Well, no, it's not going to show on here because this just shows direct reports, like what you have on the screen right here, just my direct reports. But they would be underneath Mr. Bailey for,
Yeah, no, I'm
For
talking about
HR.
his staffing.
yep. So
He's got a position in there where
he does, he does. We did try something new these last 4 months where we tried an outsourcing company to work and try to recruit for us, and that's going very well. So we did try something new this last semester. But to answer your question, yep, we do have the allocation. We have not filled it, but it's something we've talked about.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Spray?
Yeah, back on some of these slides, I'm not even gonna go to the page numbers. You talked about moving, and Ms. Saunders said the same thing, moving staff from ESSER dollars to ESSER, I guess you say, to our general fund. I know we had to, we use it, the ESSER money to fund them. We added people with the ESSER dollars as well. So the people that were moving from ESSER to the general are going to now fill some of these vacancies we had, or just stay where they're at.
It's not filling any vacancies per se. It's just, we did absorb and cut a few things, but really it's just people within the organization. It's just a change of a funding source.
Okay, right, I get that, but you said we had 136 vacancies.
We
But
do,
that's-
those are teachers and
Teachers
guidance,
all-
yeah,
okay, all right.
right. It's all the
I wanna
above.
make sure I'm right, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Any of the people that had to be cut, are any of those potential bus drivers or teachers' aides?
No, but I will tell you, I kind of think of what you're saying. There were some non-instructional people that we did eliminate those positions completely because we couldn't staff them. And they have been given opportunity, if they chose, to fill other vacancies within the organization, which I think is
Okay,
what
that's
you're.
what I'm alluding
And so there are plenty of jobs that if their funding source, always when a grant ends, if their funding source ended, they certainly could choose to take another position. It may be in a different school,
Right.
but yes, they all have the ability to. As a matter of fact, I think one of them is the position that was cut is now the assistant for the elementary executive directors up there. So we gave them opportunities to pick other positions.
Okay, that was my biggest thing, it's like, okay, if we're cutting positions, which I read through the book and what I'm seeing from here, that we actually have offered them other places to go, so that was just my biggest thing.
And they did know,
And they knew that was coming.
Right. They knew it
Right,
was
that
a
was
temporary
projected all
situation.
but
along.
it's good if they've done great work, let's keep them.
Right, exactly, and I know that was projected when,
Yes, ma'am.
all through the spending. Understand this is a temporary position, but now that we've had them for a couple of years, we need to keep them. You know, if they're loyal into what they're doing, and we need to keep that, so. I know the funding source is shifting, but the person is still here,
Sure.
right? Okay.
Ms. Foreman, I did send you that ratio from 1819. The counselor ratio was 1 to 800.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am. So we did improve, but when it gets tighter,
That's
that's
gonna be,
so. But I did
thank you.
provide that
That'll
to
be
you.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Ms. Messenger, do you have anything else?
I just really appreciated all this information.
Oh, yeah.
I
Great.
felt like it was much better than any other year I've been sitting here, so I really appreciated that. I know that you said you went back and watched our things from last year, and it really showed, because I felt like you gave us a nice level of information that I have never had before, so I really appreciated that. I also really appreciated your explanations, because when I was looking through, and I had already talked to the superintendent about it, but you also hit on it, about the variances, from this year, even with no unit changes, the variances throughout the whole, plan. And it really is, it seems like largely due to FRS and what's legally mandated for us to now pay in. But, you know, I think it's important for people to understand how much that's costing the district.
Right.
You know, without necessarily increases to fund those increases that we are incurring, you know. So I really appreciated that, because it really makes it clear language, like zero changes in staffing, yet $139,000 on just one page of changes, and that's really largely FRS, and the benefits that we're now paying in. So I appreciated that. I think that needs to be made clear, so that, you know, I understand why the legislature is doing what they're doing, because that's a liability. They want to, whatever, but it comes on us, right? So I really appreciate how clear it is. That's all I want to say, and I really appreciate the level of information you have given us. So thank you, and thank you. But I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Hello, good morning, Ms. Hello, let's see, so what do I have here? Page 10. If we could go back there for a second real quick, please. It says on bullet number 3, it says decreased bookkeepers could not be funded through Title I. I understand what that means. I guess my thought was that maybe it's for the superintendent. We had an audit, remember, a couple months ago, and internal accounts, didn't they find some problems with internal accounts at some of the schools? And are these the people that manage those internal accounts?
That doesn't really have, what we did in this past year, because we had extra ESSER money that could pick up some things, that freed up some of our Title I money for the district portion. So for Title I schools, because they end up with a lot of grants, a lot of entitlement grants, we gave them an extra bookkeeper, thinking that would help the situation. We didn't really see a net improvement for that, and it was around an $800,000 expenditure. So we decided that we could not afford it now that we're having to pull back in, so that's why they were cut. Again, each of them were given opportunities to work in other positions if they wanted to still stay with the district, but that's the why. So if you had some internal account issues, that's not why these positions were cut, yeah.
Okay. I just want
But good question. I mean, yeah, you know, internal accounts are very challenging because the rules are very strict. If people turn in cash, you've got to deposit it immediately, and that's where you tend to get, you know, yeah.
So we still have people there that are watching over those
Absolutely. Sure. They still have bookkeepers. They were just given an extra one.
additional bookkeepers. Okay, great. And then in learning the acronyms of any organization, what is a WOZ, please? A WOZ.
Oh, my.
Maybe I should know that, but today's the day I learn, so.
We partnered with Steve Wozniak a few years ago for a career pathway school, and the first one was at Palm View Elementary. Those situations in some case and supplies are paid out of the millage as well. But we do have, because we have expanded all those robotics and electronics into all of our elementary schools, we have a staff person dedicated to ensuring the alignment, materials, training, etc.
And so we call it a WOZ, which is short for Mr. Wozniak,
Yes, it is. Yeah.
who funded some of these, or?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Great, all right, see, today was a learning day for me, okay.
A good one, too.
Yes, good one, yes. Page 18, please. Bullet number 2. The total increase of staff is 133. That means if you took the number of people that we had in the 2022-23 academic year and then compared it to what we're proposing in the 2023-24 academic year, the increase overall, just pure raw numbers, there's 133 people. Is that what that means?
Right.
Okay. And I thought I heard you say it's not all teachers though. That's teachers and all other people that would, all of the positions that we're adding. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
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 Okay. All right, great. And that makes sense because we had to add 1,200 students, or we didn't have to. We have an additional 1,200 students, so we need to, it's going to cost us a little more money. So overall, the 133 new positions costs us approximately $12 million. Is that what that means?
In the fringe and, yes.
Okay. And then the ESSER adjustment of 5 million or so for staff will be moved from ESSER and charged back to the general fund. So again, I'm just trying to do the math in my head. So we have $12 million increase in staffing costs, so to speak. But normally, if we had the ESSER funds, there would be a fund called the ESSER fund, and 5 million of that would come out of the ESSER fund. Is that what that means? But we can't do that anymore because we're not going to have an ESSER fund, at least in the spring or in the fall of 22. So that means that there's $12 million of additional cost out of the general fund.
5 million.
That's
5
the
million.
total, the total expense is the 12 million,
Okay.
including that ESSER replacement. So last year, they absorbed, give or take, close to 6 million. So it really would have been, if we could have kept funding it that way, you would have only had a net cost improvement of $6 million. We're rounding up. But because it's not, that is part of that differential.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's that total expense of the 12 million.
Yeah, so it's not 17,000.
No, it's just a total of 12. Between FRS, the additional people, and that cost of the ESSER being moved back is about a net $12 million increase of expense.
Okay. And do we have any estimates based on tax revenue and stuff? Will that money be there, so to speak? I assume we get a little more revenue every year because,
Yes, and they're also looking at projecting a pretty good increase in the property taxes.
in
as
property
well.
taxes.
So,
So right now, we're real fortunate. We're gonna end with a fund balance somewhere between 11-13%. But we know we have to make some insurance adjustments. We've got to take 12 million from here of the cost, So we do have the funding, plus we have, some improvement of revenue. So right now, you'll have this at the end of June, but we're sitting with somewhere around a 7% fund balance for next year by making the adjustment of the cost versus revenue.
Okay. And remind me again, what is our minimum legal requirement for a fund balance? 3%, is that right?
3%, that's required by the state, but the board actually has 5%.
So that's a policy previous boards have put in place to have 5%. Okay. Okay, and then another acronym on bullet number 1. I understand what FRS means. I can read the words health insurance. The increase in WC, what is
Workers' comp.
Workers' compensation. Okay, great, thank you. And then the last question I have is, I seem to remember from a previous discussion, there's a chart or someone has done an analysis of the overhead administrative costs for all the school districts in Florida, and there's a ranking, and we're, number one, if someone could forward that to me again, just so I could see it. Number 2,
I think Mr. Wagner has that.
okay.
He'll get it to you.
And number 2, where do we sit in that? How are we ranked? Do you remember off the
Well, I
top of
haven't,
your head?
I don't think we've done it for this year,
Right,
but
okay.
we had done it for the prior year, so we'll give that to you. We are not, number 1, we're toward the bottom of expense for, district admin staff versus, yeah.
And that's again an interesting, you might want to send, maybe all of us would like to have it. It's an
Sure.
interesting
We'll send it to
I
everybody.
remember that chart, yeah.
statistic to have when people come and say, "God, you're too much overhead," and maybe there is too much overhead, and maybe it's time to do. I know in the Air Force they had consultants that came through and they did, what did they call it, employee analysis or something. They would look at all the jobs you have to do, and then how many people you have, and then somehow there was a magic formula that they came up with and decided how many people you had to have. But the point is that if we're not towards the top of that list, at least
Right.
based on standard practices, so to speak, we're doing okay as far as administrative overhead goes. We're not
Correct.
pumping up our numbers too much.
Right.
Okay, great. And thank you, Ms. Sellers. That's all I had. Thank you.
And just to, yeah, Mr. Tatum, your point, like it just adding up quickly some of the instructional operation, like when you broke down the different deputy of the education and operations, I mean, I think that came to like 2 to 3 million, somewhere in that range. I know we're just talking about what was on the page, not everybody else in HR and all that. So those costs will go into administrative, but I just did it quickly because I was wondering the same thing you were. It was roughly like between 2 and 3 million, where instructional, teacher support, et cetera, is close to like 400 million. So that's, I mean, and I know that's not everybody in this office. That 2 to 3 million that I'm adding up is not everybody, but it's the higher, ranked folks. So, but thank you very much, Ms. L, your group, Ms. Saunders, great job. And this is just the beginning of it, just so everybody knows. I mean, obviously the board knows this is just the beginning of this process, 3-step process. We talked about capital operations, et cetera. And this is, I gotcha, I see you. And teachers are the first step. And I know people have always asked, well, you should take the teachers first. We do. And that this is the first step in the budget process, where we say we need X amount of millions of dollars for our teachers and our staff, et cetera. So thank you very much. Before we go on.
Yeah, I just want to make sure before, because normally the budget ends up having a page like this, but just to be clear, you're Chad Choate the third, right? I mean, your name tag says the third. This is the second. I just want to make sure that gets fixed.
Sorry.
Overlooked that.
That's important.
I mean, it would be important to me if I was the third of something.
My son's where his suffix said 6 on his diploma. I've overlooked that for 4 or 5 years in focus. So doesn't surprise me I did it again.
Well, I
Yeah,
just,
so
I
we had to
just
print a
wanted
new-
to make sure.
We had to print a new diploma.
Because normally normally a page like this looks like this in the budget. I just want to make sure.
The printing cost for
you're the
diploma.
chair. I
Printing
want it to
cost
be
for
right.
diploma has gone up about by 5 cents. So if you want to take that out, I can donate that back. They had to print a second one. All right, thank you very much. We're going to go on a 5-minute recess before we go in the shade.
shade, right?
All right, welcome back to our school board workshop, May 26, 2023. We are going to be going into a shade session. So that is closed to the public, other than the last, or these people that I will read aloud and make sure that they're the ones who are attending. School board members: Mary Foreman, Chad Choate, Gina Messenger, Cindy Spray, Richard Tatum, Cynthia Saunders, Superintendent of Manatee County Schools, Stephen Dye, School Board Attorney, Doug Wagner, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Scott Hansen, Chief Technology Officer, Laura Cox, School Board Agency Clerk, Serge Jorgensen of Silent, Judy Pagan, Manager. Is she here? That's fine. Business Analysis, Joe Coop. Supervisor, IT, Bill Kelly. Risk Management, I see Bill. The following will now go into the shade meeting. And I believe everybody is good. Everybody is here. And we're going to the shade.